Chapter 31. The Badlands of Texas. Still Thursday, year 2342. The trick of it, Bill discovered watching Hoppy and Brandon mount the lift before them, seemed to be raising one's feet as they were scooped up by the mechanical bench, somehow clutching a respirator in one hand, the other gripping the spindly armrest so you didn't pitch forward and launch yourself back down to the metal loading platform. Bill stared down at the plastic cone of the respirator, slapped into his grasp by a grouchy, inattentive attendant, his feet already rising from the ground, and experienced a moment of vertigo, corrected by focusing on the waxy, stained appearance of his respiratory equipment. Are these used? Bill balked, frowning down at the plastic mask, the elastic head strap dangling uselessly. "You'll need this!" Phinneus shouted over the windy commotion of the gears clicking in the tube, fussily fitting his respirator mask over his mouth and nose while motioning for Bill to do the same. "The air is very thin on the way up to the bubble farms." Bubble farms? Bill took a series of tentative breaths from a mask which smelled decidedly of urine. "Yes, where we're going to work, the earth is too polluted to support plant life for the most part. But the Saharaza's team of scientists discovered that there was still enough clean air to support crops up in the clouds. Hence the bubble farms. So let me get this straight," Bill repeated. "My neighbors, the Sanders, who have trouble remembering trash pickup days, have a team of scientists and have somehow taken over the world. This world and this future specifically. But that's not to say it still can't be saved," Phinneus confirmed. "There's obviously more to it, but on our way up, let me give you a short synopsis. So this isn't the future." Bill was growing more confused. "Well, it is and it isn't. Things can always be changed." "In the future or the past?" Bill asked. Phinneus thought for a moment before answering. "It's all the same difference when you truly understand the circular nature of the universe, Bill. But first things first. The Sanders are obviously not who you think they are. And to that end, neither am I. And quite frankly, neither are you." Bill scoffed, turning carefully on his bench to face his uncle. "Well, who are you then, if not my uncle?" "Well, I am your Uncle Phinneus, but I am not your father's brother, as you know, nor am I your grandfather's brother. I am, in fact, your great-great-great, I think, grandfather's brother." Bill squinted his eyes, trying to trace the tree back to Phinneus, but he was already dizzy from the rising height. "So wait, are you hundreds of years old?" Bill asked. "No, I'm 68. Phinneus looked hurt. "I've been traveling since you were a boy. Why, just a few years ago for me, I was visiting with you and Bob's children. Oh, Bill, there's so much to explain, but some of this, like this," he waved his hands out to indicate the terrain below and above. "You just have to see for yourself." Phinneus took a deep breath of his canned oxygen, motioning weakly to the air around them, warning cheerfully. "It's too hard to talk in here, Bill. We'll have to finish this later. Just know this is only the first of a series of revelations that will change the way you think about the world and your place in it." 10 long minutes later, the skylift reached another platform where Phinneus blithely debarked, grabbing Bill's hand to pull him from his seat as they crested the loading platform, leaping from the chairlifts as if they were schoolyard swings, while dodging the next pair of dangling legs. Pictograph signage and a row of sputtering footlights led them to another queue where a picture indicated they should dispose of their respirators into a dirty, overflowing hamper and make their way to another line where they would await their transport. Bill stared, astonished at the rolling hills and vast spaces of the bubble farm, small dirt paths leading to hundreds of separate valleys full of crops where laborers of every size, shape, and misshape toiled in constant motion. Beyond the rolling hills to rise in the center of the floating farmland loomed several great stone and glass towers, topped with spires climbing up to touch the very apex of the dome's skin. These modern-looking edifices stood out starkly in the flora-filled atmosphere of the bubble farm, shining like beacons. The land ringing the skyscrapers was dotted with metallic silos and food processing factories. Pushed aboard by the crowds gathering behind them, Phineas and Bill were able to take a seat along the edge of the hover wagon, their legs dangling over the sides as it puttered away before everyone was seated, the driverless carriage building to a top speed of 10 miles per hour. Phineas leaned closer to Bill. You see, before the current world began, the one we know today, there was another advanced society on Earth. They called it Atlantis. Phineas glanced over to gauge Bill's expression before continuing with a sly wink. You, me, we are the last of a long line of descendants from those great Atlanteans, Bill. The same Atlantis that sank into the sea a million years ago? Semantics, Phineas huffed. In actuality, the seas rose, nothing sank. But it was enough to end one of the greatest, most advanced societies the world has ever known. How do you think we learned about time travel? The Atlanteans? Now you've got it, Phineas crowed, jumping off the wagon as it approached a row of signs reading rhubarbs, potatoes, and yams. Hoppy and Brandon peeled off to the potato field as Bill followed Phineas to report to the rhubarb foreman, identifiable by the large picture of rhubarb on his hat. The foreman was a rotund man, at least 6 feet tall as well, sporting a very small muscle shirt that exposed a tumescent stomach covered in rather long, luxurious brown hair. As they filed past, they were awarded one rusty machete, a burlap sack to loop across one's shoulder, a small plastic canteen of water, and a white pill most threw down their throats upon receipt. Bill eyed his speculatively, but Phineas tossed his into his mouth as they walked to their posts and followed it with a quick swig of water, explaining, lunch. Bill and Phineas took their place among the others already at work and, making quick study of their technique, began pulling the rhubarb plant up from the ground, chopping the stalks from the base and the leaves from the stalks before pushing those into their burlap sack. Bill continued his questions as they worked. So, if the Atlanteans were time travelers and their lands were being destroyed, why didn't they just time travel everyone away? It seems pretty stupid to stay and die if you don't have to. They did, Bill, but it was an untested technology, only available to a special few. Some made it out just in time, which is why we're here now, but most died in the flood, or the fires or the civil wars before that. Almost everything in the entire world died in the turmoil of that time. Those that were fortunate enough to have a clock traveled to the future and tried to blend in and ever so subtly encouraged the emerging human race to flourish and rebuild the civilized world again. Well, why didn't they just travel to the past and warn themselves? Bill stretched his arms, then made the mistake of leaning on his machete, which sank into the ground, leaving him bowing awkwardly trying to regain his footing. Hoppy and Brandon witnessed this unfortunate faux pas from the adjacent potato field and, giggling raucously, took turns imitating Bill's error for the rest of the long afternoon, howling in mirth each time. The potato foreman finally shouted at them to stop, or more precisely, to stop fucking the fuck around. Back to what? Phineas waved his hands around to indicate their surroundings. It was their past they were fleeing when they came here. The clocks were a new technology, Bill, but even then they understood that changing the past is far too dangerous. Bill fell silent as he reflected on his own Pleistocene misadventures. But the clocks do travel forward and back, obviously, so if they didn't want people going forward and back, Bill rationalized with a shrug. Phineas stretched, gazing up as 2 produce blimps floated overhead, thinking of how to explain the true nature of the universe. Not really forward or back, Bill, more like across and from what angle or faritude if you're familiar. It's all circular, Bill. Everything. Circular? Bill frowned, slapping rhubarb into his sack. The world has tried its best to show us these things. We're just too dense to see it. Why are clock faces circular? Why are seeds round? The circle of life is circular, as is time and space. That's the real trick to most everything. The sudden crippling blare of sirens stopped everyone from their tasks, some nearby falling to their knees in supplication. The sirens faded, but as those around him remained kneeling, Bill glanced over to Phineas and was shocked to find him on his knees as well, reaching up to pull Bill down beside him just as a large, ornate, open-air pontoon barge floated gracefully, silently over their heads. Curious, Bill twisted his neck to watch the pontoon glide past, spotting an elderly couple propped in the oversized, elaborate thrones at the center of the platform, their faces wrinkled like walnuts, nestled in a swath of silken scarves, ringed by a security detail comprised of gray-suited guards standing at attention along the rails of the ship. The barge cruised to the top of the distant skyscrapers, where its occupants would disembark and be squired to their opulent quarters within. From that same rooftop, another giant lift tube was visible, a tube made of sturdy, smoky glass that rose directly through the skin at the top of the dome before disappearing into the ether beyond. And that's how the big bosses drain the earth dry, Phinneus whispered bitterly under his breath. They just suck our valuable minerals and resources straight up like a straw. Yeah, but who are they? Bill pointed to the central towers. Shh! A neighboring kneeler hissed. A shorter siren rang out as the barge disappeared into the rooftop landing dock. Everyone around them rose and dusted the dirt from their knees, returning to their harvesting without remark. They, Phinneus explained with a frown, are your neighbors, the face of the brand, the king and queen. But the real bosses, the gray suits, are the originals, Bill, from the Atlanteans' planet of origin, Leos. And those Leotians are not the peace-seeking rebels that ended up on Earth calling themselves the Five Nations of Atlantis. That is who they ran from when they came to Earth so many millions of years ago. Suffice to say, it's too long and twisty of a story to tell linearly, but they aren't the friendly collaborators Jim envisioned when he brought them here. The rhubarb foreman stridently blew his whistle, pointing to them while broadly pantomiming bending and pulling an imaginary vegetable and placing it into an imaginary sack. Later, lying in his narrow, filthy bunk in the barracks, his uncle snug in his own cot beneath him, Bill leaned over the side of his mattress, whispering furtively, I came here to get your help, Uncle Phinneus. I have to find my wife Marci, and I know the Sanders are the ones that took her. Did you confront them? Phinneus probed. No, but Jim said she left on her own. Did she? His uncle asked quietly. No, Bill guffawed, falling silent with doubt before clarifying. I don't think so. I'm 99% sure it was Jim and Alice. But what I can't wrap my mind around, even with everything you've told me, is why us? Bill, Phinneus shifted in his cot to look Bill in the eyes. You are involved, because no matter how I tried to spare you this, no matter how far away I stayed, you cannot escape your destiny. You are one of the last heirs of one of the last surviving Atlantean families, as am I. Do you understand what I'm saying? We are members of a rapidly disappearing lineage, the last of the late great Atlanteans. And the Sanders mean to end it all. They want to destroy everything, even our past, which in turn destroys our future. So to answer your question, the Sanders have done what they've done to you and to Marci to get to me, I'm afraid. Then why you? Phinneus didn't answer for a moment before clearing his throat and carefully choosing his next words. It's because I'm the last of the clockmakers, Bill, and you were to be my successor to continue the trade, though the Sanders got in the way. We're the last of them. That's why we're so important. Without me, and without you one day, there are no more clocks to travel. Bill's head was reeling, his thoughts racing wildly. Well, I hate to ask, but is there anything else I should know that has the potential to reshape the entire history of the world before I drift off to sleep? Phinneus chuckled. I may have inherited a little Elosian trinket the Sanders seem to think they want. Something they think they need to accomplish their ultimate goal of world domination. Adding slyly, but for now, the less you know about that, the better. Bill rolled back onto his thin mattress, sighing. Uncle Phinneus, will you help me find my wife? I can't, Bill. Not yet. We need to use the fact that the Sanders haven't caught on to us yet to do so. If you can remain where you are just a little longer and pretend nothing is amiss, the Sanders will slip up, lead us to her. They want what I have bad enough to get greedy, and that's where we'll have them. Phinneus yawned. Now go to sleep. You leave in the morning, and I have an important mission to distract you when you get home. You should be expecting a message from me soon. Bill fell silent as he struggled to sleep, his uncle's revelations having indeed changed the way he thought about the world and his place in it, as promised. While it was true Bill had often suspected, deep down inside, that he was somehow special, to have it confirmed, to finally hear it aloud, well, quite frankly, it sounded absurd, and honestly a little hard to swallow part and parcel. Yet the next day, after a pre-dawn breakfast of tasteless gelatinous squares, and bidding his uncle goodbye as he hopped from the hover wagon to report for duty in the broccoli field, Bill held himself a bit straighter, his shoulders a smidge higher, emboldened ever so slightly by the discovery that the blood of Atlanteans coursed through his veins, albeit tainted by generations of commingling with lesser mortals and several strains of HPV. Boom. Whoosh.